We're going to be talking about the Tim Pool very public meltdown that just happened this week. And for those of you who don't know, so like Tim Pool, he's a kind of independent journalist, at least he started off that way. And he has since built a YouTube media empire based around his morning news commentary and also his very popular live stream Timcast IRL, which has been kind of like at the forefront of like the YouTube like new media news factory, I guess you'd call it. And we have this episode that came out this week where it was like, this is the last Timcast IRL. And Tim Pool basically went live and spent 2 hours basically complaining about his organization. And the only reason he went live is because he had a guest out there, Dave Landau, who, they flew him out, they put him up. He was supposed to be on Timcast IRL, and they were like, well, it'd be kind of shitty to just cancel the show and like have like, Dave Landau come out for nothing. So he went live just to have Dave Landau, get his screen time. But literally, like, they spent the entire episode just talking about how Tim Pool didn't want to do Timcast IRL anymore, how he was like, at the end of his rope, he hated all the people who worked for him. Like, he was just like overworked. Yeah. He wasn't having fun doing it anymore. And keep in mind that this is like 2 weeks before the election, right? At a time where he is hitting his peak ratings and people are actually depending on him to deliver news commentary and stuff like that. And it seemed to me, and by the way, link to all this stuff in the description of this video that we're going to be talking about. It seemed to me to be kind of like a weird combination of both pity party and complete disregard for his audience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know, like I've been watching Timcast IRL since it started, way back when it was just in his New Jersey apartment with Adam Krigler and stuff like that. And I've always really enjoyed Tim's live stream more so than his morning news stuff, because he just rambles to hit that 20-minute mark so he can have multiple mid-roll ads in there. Like, he doesn't actually say much. He could probably make those videos 5 minutes long if he really wanted to. But he basically spent a big portion of the show talking about how much more money he makes off of those morning lives or morning news bits, and how much easier it is because he doesn't need like a staff. Apparently he has a staff of like 30 people. And, Brian, you and I have been to Pop Culture Crisis, which is in the old Timcast Castle. The old Cast Castle, which ironically enough, he was doing this live stream from because his new one had a meltdown with their central computer. Right. But like, we know his they have drivers on staff who will like pick you up from your hotel and kind of chauffeur you to and from the Cast Castle. There are booking agents. There are people who do like the editing and the graphic design and stuff like that. But it seemed like Tim was very frustrated with the people that he'd hired, because he's tended to hire, number one, fans, and number two, friends of his. And so like, they weren't necessarily the best people for the job. He just kind of like hired them because they were quick and easy. And he talked about how there were like lots of leakers and doxers and stuff with him on the staff, people who didn't go above and beyond what they were paid to do, which is why there were so many equipment failures. And in the wake of all this, Tim basically disbands his news organization, right? And so Hannah Claire, who's a very popular member of Timcast IRL, like, she lost her job overnight. Luke Rukowski also is no longer doing Timcast. And the quartering came in and basically hired these two people he's like, well, if not working for Tim anymore, come work for me.
I like how he made a video. It was like, I'm poaching Tim Pool's employees.
Yeah.
I love Jeremy because he's just so straight up, dude.
Yeah. He basically put it out there. He's like, hey, if you got fired from Tim, come work for me, because Jeremy's angling to have what Tim does, right? Like, he wants to do that. And it's kind of ironic because Tim tried to pull off his own coffee shop, couldn't get it off the ground. Tim also, I think a big part of Tim's problem is that he's too all over the place. Like, he was trying to do music and entertainment and all this other stuff. And it's like, dude, just stick to your lane, do that really well. And then once that's on coast mode, then branch out and do some other stuff. But he's
already on coast mode, right? I mean, the dude's
no. Well, like, his big thing was that he's overworked. And that's one of the reasons why he hated doing Timcast IRL, is because he was like, I'm spending way too much time doing this stuff when I could be watching sunsets. Like
I mean,
that's his big thing.
it's his business, right? It's his company.
Well,
I mean, if he wants to dial back, I mean, I'm not defending what he did here, but it's his right to dial things back if he wants to.
But I mean, here's the thing, and we're going to get into this in a second once I throw it to you guys, is that as someone who produces not only live streams but also podcasts and YouTube channels, and like we're all in the YouTube game. We know the ins and outs of like how hard or easy it is to like hire people, fire people, produce a live stream, produce a YouTube video, all this other stuff.
It's hard.
A lot of Tim's complaints were stuff. It's like, dude, we as like little YouTubers who, don't get a fraction of the views or super chats you do, who don't have any of the funding that you do.
Right.
Pull this off way more efficially than you do. So why is that?
On a daily
why are you
basis.
complaining about it? Yeah.
He's
on a
like,
daily.
I work 10 hours a day. I'm like, what, bitch? Is that a joke? I work 20 hours a day sometimes. Get out of here.
Yeah. And also it's like doing what? It's like, okay, if you prep for the IRL stream, just hire a producer to handle all the other logistical, like this stream right now is a perfect example of that, where I had a guest lined up. She was a great guest, booked her months in advance. She was getting married. So like I had to negotiate like the right time and stuff like that. Checked in with her at the beginning of the week. It's like, hey, we still good to go? She's like, yeah, everything's good. Then last minute had a family issue pop up. It's like, okay, now we don't have a guest. And so it's like, that's the type of stuff a producer deals with. Right. Also, another thing that IRL did that was kind of revolutionary is like they refused to have telepresence guests. So people couldn't Zoom in, they couldn't Skype in, they had to be in the studio. And that is a good policy because it fosters really good conversations. But at the same time, you don't need every Timcast IRL to have like a special guest. It's like do maybe one or two guests a week, keep it easy. You don't have to fill that space because they had a good group, when Ian wasn't on anyway. But they had a good group to, kind of like discuss politics and issues and things like that. And but most of it, the thing that really got me, and I'll just say this before we get to the panel's take on it. The thing that got me about this whole last IRL thing, which was total clickbait, by the way. But the thing that got me about it was the complete disregard for his own audience. Because like Tim made it very clear that he didn't give a shit about the people who watched the show, about the people who subscribed to the memberships or donated in super chats, who had been with the show for like since the beginning and really loved, tuning in every night and getting their news from it and stuff like that. He just made it clear it was all about him. And I feel like there's a fine line that creators have to walk where it's like, yes, you have to balance work-life stuff. You have to balance your own mental health. You have to do what you're passionate about. But at the same time, there is a certain obligation to the audience that must be addressed, right? Where it's like, these are the people who you do this for. These are the people who reward you for your hard work and stuff like that. And what I got from that last IRL stream, quote unquote, is that Tim Pool is on such a high horse that he just doesn't care anymore about the people who actually put him in that position. And he's like, dude, I could do my morning news program and like, still make millions of dollars and not have to worry about shit. And I'm like, well, if you piss off all of your people, they're not going to show up and you're not going to get that ad revenue,
right.
So, and especially when you have people like Jeremy from The Quartering, who's now a direct competitor for like that, throughout the day news cycle. You got people like Mr. Reagan, who is a far more interesting news analyst than Tim Pool ever could hope to be, at least in my opinion. So I want to throw this to you, Mr. Reagan, because you are in that world. You know a lot of the same people that Tim Pool knows and stuff like that. So what was your take on this very public struggle session / meltdown / pity party that Tim Pool threw for himself this week?
Honestly, I tried to kind of avoid it. I had to watch some stuff for this show, but look, I've never been on Tim's show. Tim knows who I am. We've talked before, but he doesn't really. I don't know. He never had me on his show, which I never really understood. I mean, there's been moments when I've been in the news, and he just doesn't care. I don't think he likes me for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I've known people who worked with him, like worked for him, and have actually gone to him and said, can you have Mr. Reagan on the show? He's in the news for this or that or whatever. And it was just like, no, he doesn't want to have you. I'm like, all right, fine. But from what I've heard from his employees, he's kind of I don't want to call him a narcissist or anything, but he's just, he's a star. He is a star. I mean, legitimate. Like, people love him. They watch his show. They just absolutely love him. Personally, he's not really my kind of YouTuber. There are certain people that I like to watch, certain personalities I like to watch. I never really liked Tim Pool, but lots of people do, and I really respect that. I do respect that. But like with his staff, there was a lot of like non-paid interns and that kind of thing going on. And like a lot of the people that work for him, the rumor is like from me, like that I got from people that worked for him was that he just didn't seem to appreciate them. Even though they were working their asses off for him, he didn't seem to appreciate it. And this meltdown kind of confirmed that. He was just like, it's everybody's fault but mine.
Mhm.
And I just kind of felt like, dude, maybe have a little humility. He's kind of this thing where he's just like, I'm a god, you all work for me, and you just haven't been pulling your weight. Okay. I need you to like carry the god stones for me on your little backs and do all the work for me and all this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, it's his show. Like, he needs to hire the right people for the job. And if he hasn't hired the right people for the job, maybe they need to go. He needs to hire some other people. I don't know. But I don't know. Sitting there and complaining about that stuff on your own show seems, I don't know. It's just kind of, it's kind of cringy.
Cringy, man.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a bad look. I don't really have anything against Tim Pool personally. He's all right. He's got to figure out what he wants to do for his own show. It is difficult, I would say. It's very difficult to run a company that big. And when you're the star of something, like if you're the talent for a project like that, you only have so much time in the day, and your most valuable thing that you can do with your time is to be on air. Like, the more he's on air, the more money he makes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird to me that he's like cutting. That's the thing he's cutting. He's cutting his airtime. Like, that's to me is bizarre. Like, that's the thing that's going to make you the most money. He's like, oh, I make so much money on this, I don't need the rest of it. Well, make the rest of it better. Make the rest of it more lucrative. Why would you cut that? I don't know. It's a weird decision for me. I don't know. I think it kind of flipped him out that he had that whole like Russian $10 million thing that he had to deal with. And I don't know what's going on with the guy. I feel a little bit bad for him, if I'm honest. It's tough. Like I said, it's tough. I understand streamlining. I almost have no people that I work with at all, ever. I just do everything myself. Obviously, I've worked with you guys in the past. I think I'm going to start working with you guys, I think, like next week again. Trying to convince Kadish to work with me again after I've been such an asshole to him and just dismissed him for years. But no. I kind of, I wasn't doing so many videos recently, so I'm like, I guess I'll just edit them myself. But I'm going to work with Kadish again. But yeah, I don't really have a big team, and that's the primary reason, is because once you have a big team, you are locked into the stuff you're doing, and you have to rely on a lot of other people. And it does get tough. I mean, it's a real business. My father, I grew up with my father creating a business, essentially grew this business throughout my life. And I watched him do it. And, it was a struggle. And he was stuck in one place for, his entire life. And for me, I once I had a YouTube channel, I'm like, do I really want a studio? Do I really want employees? Like, I'd much rather just be able to travel and do my YouTube channel from anywhere. So streamlining that for me gave me a lot of freedom. So for me, making a ton of money was never the goal. It was always having an interesting life. And, thanks to Elon Musk, I've had a very interesting couple of months.
Yes, indeed. Him retweeting your Kamala parody was a big deal. But I just want to couch this. I know that I might have gone a little bit hard on Tim in this intro, but I really do like Tim Pool. I feel like he's stronger when he's in that kind of like talk show format where it's not just like him having to monologue. Because when I watch his news bits, like, it's almost painful sometimes, because he does the Trump weave, where he'll just go off on these tangents and then like eventually come back. But he always hits that 20-minute mark, and that he's trying to stretch each of these stories out to 20 minutes just for those mid-roll ads so that he can make that money. And no shade on that, make your money, Tim. But I feel like when he's like holding court and he's got like guests and co-hosts and stuff like that, he's far more entertaining and easy to listen to than when he's like just doing it on his own. I think that's what made Timcast work, is that like he was a very strong kind of like host. And then all these other people just kind of added different things. But like, if Ian started going off on like a weird tangent, he'd slap him down and bring it back around and stuff like that. So like, I always felt like IRL was the perfect format for what he wanted to do. But I want to throw this to Brian, because Brian, one of the big things that kind of the catalyst for like this big temper tantrum that he threw was the fact that, so, you know, we here at the Salty Nerd Studio, in each one of our studios, we have a central computer that does all like the live streaming, and like, you know, we feed the cameras through it and stuff like that. So the computer is the heart of a studio.
Right.
But I guess Tim Pool's studio, with all of its millions of dollars and 30 employees and stuff like that, they couldn't figure out how to swap out a graphics card that basically malfunctioned on their central computer.
Right.
And so he's like, what am I paying all you people for? What am I spending all this money on a new studio for if we have to go back to our old studio? And, you know, big shout out to Brett Desovic, who's been on the live stream before. Like Brian, you and I have both been on his show, Pop Culture Crisis, with Mary Morgan. He's awesome. She's awesome. Like, I've never had a bad experience with the Timcast crew. So like I and also I was a big fan of Hannah and Phil Labonte, and, you know, Ian. Like, as annoyed as I am with Ian, like I still, like, you know, I think he's a cool guy, right? I just don't like watching him on a news show. But like this whole idea here that like basically everyone that Tim had surrounded himself with is the problem, and this meltdown of a computer was the thing that broke him, I thought was kind of interesting. So I wanted to get your take on that, Brian.
Yeah, first off, if everyone around you is the problem, guess what, dude? You're the problem. That's how it works. If everyone around you is the problem, that means you're the problem. I'm sorry. I like Tim and I appreciate his hustle, but he went really hard on that stream, and those guys were basically begging for their jobs. And I'm sorry, that's just effed up on live stream. He was it just stinked of entitlement. First off, every computer has a graphics card. In case you're not a tech guy, every single computer has a graphics card. The graphics card might not be powerful enough to run a show, but you don't need a huge graphics card to run a show. You just need a pretty good one. I have 2 computers in my home studio, and if my graphics card expired, I'm just going to swap out with one of the computers that has a graphics card, or my kid's computer, or whatever. Look, it could have been an easy fix. Tim got mad that someone else didn't foresee that they needed a graphics card. The fact that there's no backup to your main computer, and you make that much money. I mean, dude, have you seen his super chats in that pathetic live stream alone? He was making buku bucks, thousands and thousands of dollars, enough to buy like 17 graphics cards.
He should probably have a couple in the storage shelf, right?
Straight up, there should be one of those
17 graphics cards and a meal from Five Guys,
right? And a meal from Five Guys, bro. Look, you should have one of those, you know, those old school elementary school metal cabinets. Odin knows what I'm talking about. The one where they keep all the supplies. Have one of those and just have like 6 graphics cards, a couple processors, some RAM. Just have a whole computer ready to go. You make that much money. You spend 2 years trying to build a coffee shop that I don't understand why it takes so long to build a coffee shop, but I'm not going to get on that. You spent all this time and all this money doing stuff you didn't need to do, but you didn't buy a backup graphics card? Are you kidding?
Yeah, but is it Tim's job to make sure that the graphics cards are in stock in the office?
Look, bro,
that would be his office manager's job, right? I don't know.
I don't know if they have an office manager, because like he was also complaining to the poor guy sitting there begging for his job. Basically, he's like, "How long did it take to get this projector up?" He pointed to something off screen, right? The guy's like, "Well, it's up now." He goes, "Yeah, how long did it take? A couple months." He goes, "Well, why did it take a couple months?" Well, I put the order in, and stuff never came.
Is Tim one of these guys who has to have his fingers in everything and control everything?
It must be that. So, like, what I would say is, like, look, you got to trim the fat, not kill them, not remove the employees that are actually doing the work, but like, who's signing the checks? Who has the company credit card where the guy couldn't put the projector up? I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but dude, you're the boss. So if you're working 16 hours a day and you don't like it, well, kill the skating crap, kill the coffee shop, kill the streaming vans, kill the double studios, kill the stuff that is taking your time and not making a penny for anyone around you. Kill all this stuff that is taking your time away from your quote unquote family you want to start, and do your job and then do your family. Like, if you don't have time for a coffee shop, don't start a coffee shop. Plus, who starts a brick and mortar coffee shop in 2024?
I would disagree with you slightly.
I mean, but dude, he's complaining that he can't do IRL because he's too busy.
No, but the point is, Kadish is right. It's not like, or I don't know if maybe it was Mr. Butters. I can't remember. But somebody made the point that like, you really you are relying on somebody else to do stuff, and if somebody keeps on, effing it up, maybe get somebody else.
Yeah, well, let that person go.
Problem. Yeah, I think Tim might have a problem with firing people. Which is
I don't think he does, bro, because he went on live. He went on a live stream with poor Dave Landau. And by the way, Dave Landau has now been on 2 gigantic right-wing streams that have just imploded at some point. But he has Dave Landau on, and he has his employees on, and they're basically begging for their jobs on live stream while he chastises them. It's so cringy.
The best
I'm not going to give Tim. I appreciate his thoughts, but I'm not going to give Tim any credit here. That stream was straight up cringe, unnecessary, and I felt sorry for everyone that was in the studio.
Listen, here's the best part of the whole thing. Brian, you're on the spectrum, right? Are you on the spectrum?
F?
That was a great part of the show. I loved it.
When Landau just straight up asked him.
He asked him,
"Are you on the spectrum?"
That was funny.
It's like I didn't know that was a thing you could ask people. It changed my world.
I feel like Dave Landau can ask anyone anything. So.
I'm gonna start using it every week. Mr. Reagan, are you on the spectrum? Are you?
It's one of those questions where you're like, I don't know.
Well, technically, everyone's on the spectrum, right? It's just different levels of the spectrum. Yeah, it's the spectrum.
Oh which spectrum are you talking about?
but Mr. Reagan, to kind of Brian's point, like the whole part about putting on a show, right, is that you have a producer, right? You hire a producer. If you look at kind of the Daily Wire stuff, you have Jeremy Boring, who's behind the scenes dealing with all the stuff, while the talent just focuses on, performing on the show. And so I think Tim's big issue is he was always his own producer. He'd never delegate to someone to kind of handle the logistics of putting on the show so that Tim could just focus on show prep and then show up and do his thing.
The producer?
I don't think so. I think she's a member of his company. So she oversees a lot of the financial stuff and things of that nature. But in terms of IRL should have had its own dedicated producer, right? They should have been the guy coordinating.
Absolutely. To me, if you have that kind of money, why would you ever do that stuff yourself?
Yeah, right? And I think it was just because I think it's just because Tim is a micromanager and he's a little bit of a control freak. Mm-hmm. He wants to do things in a specific way, and he either wasn't able to find someone who could produce the show in the way he wanted, or he wasn't willing to find someone like that.
What's crazy is Brett
annoyed me about Tim Pool.
Brett is right next to him, is very competent with all that stuff.
Yeah.
He could have swapped out that card and handled the producing, no problem.
I'm sure
I was there in the studio. I watched him in person.
That probably were.
Go ahead, Mr. Reagan.
Sorry, Mr. Reagan.
So he started out as a leftist. He was a lefty guy, right?
He was a Bernie bro.
I think, right?
Bernie bro. Yeah.
So I think what happened was when he started out, he made a lot of friends at YouTube because he was doing some pretty interesting stuff, and the YouTube staff I think really liked him, and so he kind of got in with them good. If you're in good with the YouTube people, they will actually help you out with the algorithm. And if they don't like you, you are effed, right? I was effed. My friend Elijah was effed. I had a few people who got really screwed over by the YouTube staff. But he was always helped out by the YouTube staff. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that he ever really understood that. And to Tim's credit, he's very good at what he does. He got a lot of fans. There's a lot of people that love him, that still love him, right? And he sort of evolved from a leftist to quasi right wing, whatever.
I'd say libertarian.
Yeah, libertarian. But and so that's a lot of people respect him for that, and he's got an interesting perspective because he was on the left for so long. But I think those friendships and that positive association with the company that he was working for, YouTube, or working with YouTube, really helped him out a lot. And I don't think he ever really appreciated that. There's so many people out there that could have been as successful or more successful than Tim Pool. But Tim Pool had this sort of kind of lucky thing going where he was, buddy with the YouTube people. And that really exploded his channel. And he's never really, I don't think he's really ever recognized. He's never been humble enough to recognize that that's a huge part of the reason for his success. But yeah, that's the only real problem I've ever had with Tim Pool is he doesn't really recognize that he doesn't seem to appreciate the fact that he was really lucky in his life.
Yeah.
He seems to think
YouTube definitely plays favorites, but I want to throw this to Mr. Butters. Dutch. So we've had Adam Krigler on the show before. We know Adam. We've talked to him about his time at Timcast and stuff like that, and it was really interesting to get to see his reaction to like this whole thing, because he went live a couple times. He actually watched the last IRL stream and commented on it and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting to see different people's takes on this, because it's all universally kind of anti-Tim. So I wanted to get your take on, like, what did you think of like the last Timcast IRL in general and people's reaction to it?
Surprised to no one. I'm not really a big, huge Tim Pool fan. I don't really watch a lot of his stuff. But what I'm getting from all of this stuff is that he feels overworked, and he needs to marry his lady that he hired on the show and knocked up. I don't know what their relationship is, but apparently he's probably doing some things they weren't supposed to do before this relationship was out there. And he needs to hire a CEO and have somebody run the business side of things while he stays in front of the camera. I mean that's pretty much the bottom line for me. The dude's obviously overworked and overstressed, and he's got a lot of stuff on his brain, and he's got a huge ego, and I think all that stuff is inside his head is fighting, and he needs to prioritize things and probably dial his roll down a little bit. So I mean,
he's opening too many skate parks and trying to open coffee shops and doing music videos and trying to do comedy.
How long have we been trying to open our coffee shop? 2 years?
Yeah.
Like you're yelling at the guy across the table that like just started working for you less than 2 years ago about how you are failing at opening your brick and mortar coffee shop. Like, come on.
Yeah.
The problem is not. The problem is not
sorry.
over the fact that he's doing so many things. It's the problem is he's doing so many things while trying to micromanage every single one of them. Like, because he has the money and he has the means to be able to get all of these projects going, and whatever the issues might be with the coffee shop, those can be dealt with. But the fact is, he doesn't want to delegate anything to anybody else because he is a control freak, and it is destroying, honestly, it's destroying any capabilities that he has to grow this business any further at this point.
And that brings me to you, Odin, because even though Salty Saturday is the second biggest live stream on YouTube, you work for the first biggest live stream on YouTube, Friday Night Tights, and you have some insight into the inner workings of that. But like, if you look at someone like Gary and even someone like Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, these are guys, they're just normal guys like us, yet they have built like their own kind of mini empires. Gary has, X-Ray Girl as his producer. He has, like when they came here to the Salty Nerd studios, like they had people in the background doing like chat moderation, like a bunch of other stuff. So like he has like his own little group, but it was like maybe 3 or 4 people at most, working in the background while like he's just focused on doing the live stream and wrangling the cats like every good like host does. And so like if you look at someone like Gary and then compare him to Tim Pool and what Tim Pool was complaining about, it feels like Tim Pool has no idea what he's doing, and Gary on a much smaller level, but just as popular in terms of like his live stream, is just killing it, and with like a fraction of the overhead and a fraction of the frustration. So I want to get your take on this. What was your read on Tim Pool's kind of like public meltdown and how it compares to other shows that you're involved with?
The best part about all of that is, we talk about how excellent the things that Gary puts out are, and yet even Gary and everyone else on Friday Night Tights are willing to admit we're all idiots. Like, it's like we're all special in our own way, and yet we can figure this stuff out, right? But that is the big difference, is that he is willing to delegate certain things over. And guess what? Sometimes people make mistakes, and those have to be dealt with, just like any leader has to deal with. And so that is something that any person in that position should be ready to take. And honestly, there are so many things that we can go after him here for, because honestly, he made a ton of mistakes just by everything he was saying on that stream. But to me, the biggest faux pas, the worst thing that he did, the biggest thing that I cannot get over is how unprofessional he was while having a guest that he flew out to be on his show to talk about stuff, obviously, that he had an idea of what he was going to talk about beforehand, just to then have to then sit there and listen to Tim, like, for lack of a better
Play
expression,
therapist.
I don't like to complain nonstop the entire show. Basically, yeah, exactly. To play therapist, try to get jokes in, try to keep it up, try to
dude, he was working his butt off, dude.
Yeah, like you don't get to the are you on the spectrum unless you're like, okay, I'm running out of material here. I gotta turn it on you a little bit, saying, all right, man, you kind of you flew me out here to just complain to me about your problems. This is not really a professional thing to do, and that's the worst thing to me. It's so unprofessional for him to do that with a guest on air. Like if it had happened where the guest was canceled because of a mistake someone else made, okay, I can at least understand why the show is like no one else there, and so then you're venting your emotions. Even that's unprofessional because you're the boss, you're the leader, you're supposed to set the tone, and that's not a good thing. But it's even worse when you do that with a guest that is supposed to be there for other reasons. And you go into some of those little things. Like the other bad thing about it too is like it's all over this graphics card, and I'm like, bro, you realize that most laptops today can run the show that he is running. Like any computer that has Thunderbolt 3 or 4, you just need one connection that can hook up all the cameras, all the things like that, and a computer signal and a Wi-Fi signal and whatever it is. And guess what? You can run your show. So the fact that, as was being mentioned, he didn't have a backup system, which could even be something as small as a laptop to be able to do something like that. And if you need to cut things down where it's like, hey, we can only get 2 of the cameras working, you make it work, right?
But you can do it with a Microsoft Surface, bro. It's not that hard.
No, like, and like, it just honestly is the thing that just I keep coming back to, and it just always, it really turned it off to like really just made me ticked off at him in general. And I think that he'll probably end up losing a lot of members because of it. I think is because he brought someone out and then just completely wasted their time for lack of a better expression.
He not only wasted their time, but he was blatantly disrespectful of his audience.
Yeah.
I mean, number one, so the title of the live stream was pure clickbait. I feel like there was a part of Tim who was like, okay, I'm going to capitalize off of what I'm feeling right now. I'm going to threaten to, end this show, and that's going to get me a lot of ratings. But like, just where he was talking about how, the show makes a lot of money, but it's not worth the hassle. I make more money, and have an easier time just doing my news stories at the beginning of the day, blah, blah, blah. It was just kind of like, dude, like the people who tune into your evening show, like, religiously, who don't bother with like your morning show, it's like, what are you telling these people?
It also drives his morning show though. Like you can have the live stream is what drives the rest of his channel. It's always been that way. Like I can just tune in myself. And
I don't think, because he did start off doing like the multiple news stories per day, and then it morphed into like him doing his live streams type stuff.
I mean, he gets the most amount of love and shares and all that with his.
Well, also, and I want to throw this to Mr. Reagan and Odin again, between the two of you. So like, this is a guy. He started off doing this show in his New Jersey apartment with his roommate, and now like he interviewed a former president of the United States, Donald Trump. He's interviewed some of the most influential political figures in Congress, right? He has made inroads with celebrity, like, the Kanye West thing that he had on his show that was like, was absolutely batshit insane crazy. Like he's had legitimate people on his show that shape the course of the nation, right? And he's on there bitching about shutting it down because of a graphics card. This is a live stream that morphed into one of the most legitimate news shows on YouTube, right? And here he is because he had a bad night. And trust me, we've all been there. But we don't go live and bitch about it and complain about it and accuse other people of being the problem, right? We tried, like Odin said, it like there is a certain level of professionalism that you need to have, even on YouTube, right? This isn't like a Zoom call where it's like nobody's watching it except the people on the call.
It reminded me of one of those thoughts that gets on Twitch and complains to everybody about not sending in enough.
Yeah, not getting enough tips. Yeah,
and they're gonna have they have a temper tantrum and threaten to quit.
Yeah,
it's like,
come on, guys.
but Mr. Reagan, like a lot of the people in the field who've started off their own news shows. They don't get interviews with former presidents and stuff like that. What's your take on Tim just being like, oh yeah, I've achieved so much with this live stream, but it's stupid and I'm just going to end it because I don't like it.
It is the problem. It just comes back to the fact that he just takes on everything himself. He's got this thing where he's like, I'm the guy, right? I'm the guy. I'm everything. I'm Timcast. I'm everything. And it is a team thing. And you've got to give responsibility to a lot of the other people on your team. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. Otherwise, you're never going to be as professional as you can. And he doesn't seem to want to do that for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, I don't know him personally, so I can't give you an insight there. But I don't know why he wouldn't do that. To me, that's the obvious thing to do. He's obviously made it a very professional show in terms of like filming it and everything like that. But I look, he's got to do the show the way he wants to do it. That's the trouble with YouTube. Like, the great thing about social media is that it democratized fame. It used to be that you would have to go get a degree in broadcasting and then people would let you work at their news station or whatever. Now you can get people who want to analyze the news or want to bring you the news or whatever it might be. And if they are popular with the people, they will become famous. They will become successful. They will make money in spite of the fact that nobody, like the gatekeepers, didn't let them in. And I think that's a great thing. But in this particular case, this guy got too popular for maybe what he was ready to be able to deal with. And that's, that's just the problem that comes with being too successful sometimes. Some people just don't know how to do it. I've many times, and this is not just with social media, in business as well. There are people whose product or whose service just grow too big too fast. I mean, you hear them talking about this on Shark Tank all the time. I used to watch Shark Tank. They used to say, look, this person's business grew too fast and they didn't know how to deal with that, right? They didn't know how to scale. And so it just collapsed, right? This happens with tech companies. This happens with all kinds of different companies. I think Tim Pool did a really good job for the most part, but probably, it's the same problem that we keep talking about on the show. He was too much of a micromanager and he was unwilling to give up control. And that's really the only way that he could have grown any bigger or been any, just step back a little bit and let other people handle some stuff.
All right. I want to ask Brian this question, and then I want to ask Odin the same question and get both their responses about this. One of the big things I've been seeing in response to Tim Pool's kind of like public meltdown was that it had a lot to do with the tenant media controversy. And we talked about tenant media on a previous episode of the live stream, where basically Lauren Chen and her company were being financed by people from Russia Today. And so like it was like Russian interference, and they didn't properly tell people like Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, all these people that signed on with them, and they were basically being funneled like Russian money. And this all came out with Biden's DOJ. Brian, do you think that because Tim Pool basically said like, hey, I didn't know about any of this. I was the victim here.
Right.
The DOJ said I was a victim. Do you think this had anything to do with his meltdown?
That's fascinating. Imagine if, the money, the Russian money, it dried up and now he's got to work a little harder. Maybe there's some less money coming in and like the stress is, I mean, it makes sense. Like the tenant money did dry up, right? Like he's not getting that money anymore that he was getting.
It was basically a syndication deal, but I don't think it was like the bulk of like his income.
So the fact that like there is money and we don't know how much it was, right?
I think it was like $1 million or something like that.
That's a lot of goddamn money. Like,
not compared to what his other shows make.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. So, I mean, I just think it's interesting. Like the tenant thing dried up for him. That's got to add stress. He did have that tweet right afterwards where he was, and I'm sure it was sarcasm, where he was like, I think the Ukraine war is a good idea. And he's trying to get the DOJ off his back.
He does like to troll on Twitter a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's entirely possible that money was an added stressor for him. And I just think the guy is doing too much. And I think he has a very hard time managing people because he wants to be involved in everything. And he's probably not a great manager. And when things start to get rough, Cass Castle, I think the last video they put up was like 6 months ago and it got like 1,500 views. That's not great, dude. A lot of his projects that aren't IRL, they don't do as well. Obviously Pop Culture Crisis does well, but a lot of the other projects, like they're pretty much canceled or they weren't doing very well or whatever. I can see being frustrated, putting a lot of effort into something that didn't pan out. And if you did that like 5 or 6 times, in a 5-year period and like things don't pan out, and the only thing that's panning out is your original thing, I could see that being extremely frustrated, but he's taking it out on the wrong people. And I think it was super cringe to do that on a live stream with poor Dave Landau and the employees begging for their jobs. Crazy.
And weird. You'd think they just have a meeting.
Yeah.
Just have a meeting, dude. Like,
it was a public therapy session. But I want to throw this to Odin. So Odin, I know that a lot of people are saying it was him losing the tenant media money. Like, I don't think that was a big factor in this. But one of the interesting things to me was that after the dust was starting to settle on this and people were, he was kind of facing this backlash, he basically came out and said, oh, like, I want to start a family, I want to get married, and I want to have a kid and all this other stuff. And he tried to like reframe it as, I'm doing this for my own personal mental health and happiness, and therefore it's okay for me to fire all these people and do like a public struggle session. What's your take on that? Do you think he was like earnest in saying that, or was this more of like a CYA moment for him?
Yeah, honestly, it felt like his brain just not being able to process the fact that he did something that he should not have done in all the things that he was saying and in the struggle session that he was having, and then decided, hey, well, since I'm already speaking about all the things, might as well be open and honest about this thing too, right? Or at least indicate as much, right? Because what happens at the beginning of the very next show, right? It's like, oh, by the way, I'm engaged and having a child, right? So it's kind of like we looked at his breakdown in this capacity, and so I think that he became a lot more of an open book in certain ways. The thing that like just really bothers me about what he was going after, though, was the fact that he made it seem like there were people who were like freeloading, who weren't doing their job, and so without really naming names. And so all we know is that by the next day, SCNR is done. Hannah Claire is gone, and so that's like the only thing that we really knew from it. Like, so I don't know of anyone else that was let go by name that we have like knowledge of necessarily that was like on the day-to-day doing stuff for him. But the fact that it's like, of all the people, Hannah Claire is the one who goes, like, it's like, I'm sorry, she doesn't come across as someone who's going to be the one in charge of a graphics card. So it's like, if that was like the main complaint, it's like, okay, what does she have to do with that? The only other thing I could think of is, my question would be, what were the numbers for SCNR News? I can't imagine they were great. That would be the only thing that would make sense for him to say, SCNR is gone. And I guess her primary role was that. But she was also a great co-host. And so that was the other thing with it as well. It's like, are you saying that she's not worth at least keeping on as a co-host when she's clearly very competent at the job? And then it brings up the other thing too, which brings it back to the fact that he's so self-centered and that he's so egotistical and so much of a micromanager that he could not even let other people really even host the show. The only other ones that I can think of in recent memory was the Timcast IRL, right? Where you would have Seamus come on and host. And I look back at that because I've thought to myself, some people might say, well, you can't have someone else on because the numbers wouldn't be there if Tim's not there. Those shows did 300 to 400,000 views, which is about exactly where all of the other shows tend to be, depending on where the guest is. So it shows us that basically what he was able to do, and we can't deny this fact, he was able to build this thing up on his own. Right, he was able to build this up as far as his news commentary. We have to throw certain things to Adam. We have to give Adam Krigler credit because he was a part of founding, the Timcast IRL show and like making that what it is. So we have to obviously give credit there. But as far as just the brand, right, the brand itself, he built that up. But he got to a point where he built it up to a point where he could let other people take over certain things. Right, when he was sick, I remember there was a couple times where he canceled the show. And I'm like, are you serious? Because you're sick, you're canceling the entire show when we already know you've got people that could be there that could actually host the show, and the numbers would be almost the exact same, and the show would actually be pretty good. Because the other problem that he has as a host is that he does not know how to let other people talk.
Odin, as somebody who's allowed Dutch Butters and Brian from the podcast host Salty Saturdays in the past, I feel Tim's pain. I know. Oh, yes. I know the dichotomy.
But when you have someone like, a Seamus who can do it, right? Or someone like a Hannah Claire, I'm sorry, like she could host a show. I'm just saying it right now because she could easily take over based on everything that we've seen from the many shows that she was on. And Lord knows there were other people on there that could do the same thing. And so like that to me is like, dude, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You build something, and then you start to say, all right, I'm going to let this part go. I'm going to let this part go. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Especially if it's about numbers or money, if that's like his focus point, like he's not going to really lose much because, as I mentioned, Timcast did as equal for the numbers. It's not Tim that sells it. It's the fact that he built it because he was able to get all these eyes on these other new people. They're now able to, like, I tune in not for Tim. I tune in because I want to see the panel. typically.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh, okay.
usually the panel.
Is Hannah Claire on this week? Is is it Libby Evans on this week? Like the people that typically come back, is Luke on? And I know that people hate Ian.
Luke
I
could have
love
been
him,
a great host as well.
Oh,
like
agreed,
if he was given a chance. But
now someone
yeah,
said was he let go? Like he was just on every time that he was in town. So
he basically was doing his own thing. So like he
Yeah.
was just kind of like a casual guest, but like he could have been a guest host. Seamus did a great job. Hannah would have been great.
Hannah Claire, excuse me. I had to correct you.
Hannah Claire.
Correct you. It's Hannah Claire.
Sorry.
Okay.
Even Phil Labonte could have easily, done the hosting duties.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, every time Ian was on a show, I just turned it off because I was like, I don't want to listen to this guy.
It depends. The one thing Tim's right on, he rolls a 1 or a 20, but when he throws those 20s, I'm like, all right, this is fun.
All right. Real quick before we get to super chats, Mr. Reagan, I know that it's very, very late where you are. Are you cool to hang out a little bit longer, or do you need to get going?
No, we can chat a little bit. Just texting this girl I'm dating, and I'm annoyed. So I might as well talk to you guys.
Okay, great.
Do you
Well, we
need to
love
have
an
a struggle
annoyed
session, Mr. Reagan?
Yeah. Do you need to shut down your entire YouTube channel because this girl is?
I might. She's pissing me off. Yeah, no, she's all right.
All right.
I
Well,
think the show's over because I'm not going to text message back.